This is the Milo Sweet Podcast, where you'll learn to get unstuck. Start now. Conquer life's challenges by learning to do difficult. Find quick and clever ways to overcome. Wait, did you think life was going to be easy? Remember, all of your excuses are now dead to me. Let's get started. Guess what time it is? It's time for you to hit the subscribe button and find just 1% that you think will benefit from this. But if you're feeling a little like generous, right? Or you're super free with your time right now, probably doing nothing because you're listening to this. Well, maybe if you're doing something, actually just make yourself free right now. Hit subscribe. What are you waiting for? Hit it. Come on. Hit subscribe.
That's very interesting. It kind of reminds me of a book I read by Malcolm Gladwell. The title is escaping me, but he was saying that in a study that he was a part of, or that he used for the book, basically the number one indicator of a marriage making it or not making it was if contempt or criticism was number one. You know, they could tell based on their interactions and how they talked about certain topics. If contempt was there, that was a huge indicator that the marriage would be unsuccessful, meaning I'm already coming in criticizing you or making you feel lesser than and me better than, instead of saying, hey, I want to talk about this. I think the other thing that you didn't highlight, but what you said, it brought up in me, was that we actually need to really be kind and gentle to ourselves. You really can't do something for someone else that you don't do for yourself. So if you're constantly criticizing yourself or you're making your needs feel unvalidated, like you're not making that valuable to you, it's very, I find, I would love for you to weigh in on this. Just feel like that's a weird expectation for you to make someone else have to make that a priority when you actually don't image or mirror that at all. You don't show that. So I find that really interesting. What do you think that, like, how does someone, we talked about that a little bit. I want to know just what's one tip that someone can start making their own needs of value to themselves, like if they're not doing that, because I find that what you think you're doing versus what you're actually doing, there's always a huge disconnect, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Yeah, what is something somebody can do to help them feel worthy of the things that they need? Great question. There's a lot that people can do. One of the best things that people can do is really work on their shame. Shame is the relationship killer. It's, it causes us to pick somebody that maybe, isn't good for us. But shame is the relationship killer, because when we feel shame, we make other people not feel good. And we, if you ever kind of meet somebody or dated somebody, I've told my wife every day, I'm so glad I'm married to you. And I mean it, because she's a fantastic wife. And I tell her every day I'm happy that I'm married to her. She's a fantastic wife. And if I had married any of the other girls I had previously been interested in, whether that I dated or been interested in, a few of them are already divorced. I'm like, man, I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody in that situation, but it's like, I'm a marriage counselor. This is kind of my life's purpose. So I got to have a good marriage. But it's like, I freaking dodged a couple bullets. I'm extremely happy I'm married to my wife. She's a great woman, and she's, I'm fortunate. And
I love that.
And so I tell her every day. I tell her, if not every day, a few times a week. I tell her, and I've told her why here's why I'm very, fortunate. And I really mean that. I'm very, very, very fortunate. But what shame does is it's probably the biggest relationship killer, because number one, it hinders, like you're talking about, it hinders our relationship with ourselves. Because when we all have shame, don't get me wrong, we all have shame, but shame is what causes us to conform to social norms. And so the reason, that, like a plumber's crack, we all kind of find that funny, because it's violating a social norm. And And we are all conscious about when we bend over, our plumber's crack, quote unquote, because we're, that's a healthy shame that keeps us, in line. And part of what can happen though is we have toxic shame, and toxic shame comes from rejection. It can come from parental rejection. It can come from spousal or romantic rejection. It can come from just rejection. And enough shame enough rejection over time is going to really create ingrained toxic shame. And people who have shame really have a feeling of self-hatred or anger towards themselves, and they really feel unlovable and worthless. And so when we feel unlovable and we feel worthless, we're not going to really feel worthy of asking for anything or needing anything, and we're not going to really expect anybody to be there for us. So we may settle romantically. We may, we can almost create self-fulfilling prophecies, like we talked about with, criticism. Like, I'm afraid of being abandoned. I'm afraid of being alone. And I've got this feeling of shame. I know you're going to reject me because deep down, I know I'm not any good. And I come at you really intense, and I'm critical and I'm harsh. I'm creating what I don't want. And a lot of that is obviously some of that's going to be related to our partner, of course. I don't want to minimize that or deny any of that. But shame will it'll cause us to self-sabotage. It'll cause us to, because we'll think, I've never been popular. I've never been liked. I've never been this. I've never had that. I've never whatever, fill in the blank. And then when that chance comes, we either deny ourselves that opportunity, or we stop short, or we sabotage ourselves in the process. And, when I did my TEDx talk, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to self-sabotage this. I'm going to kick butt and take names. And I worked on it every day for a month, several hours some days. And we had a guy in our group that spoke whose talk, he just totally bombed. And his talk will not be released online because he was working on his talk up until pretty much the night before he was supposed to give it. He was still writing it, and he hadn't rehearsed it any, and he ended up delivering it from his cell phone, the notes from his cell phone. And as watching TED Talks, these are memorized talks where people are reciting them word for word. And,
right.
And if they do have notes, it's extremely rare to see somebody with notes. And if they do have them, they're not, they're not reading from them. And so, and his talk of all things was on time management. And so, he did a talk on time management.
I'm sorry.
And so that's the irony. His talk was on time management, and he, bombed. And here is an opportunity that anybody would have wanted to have. But because there's this feeling of, I'm not going to do well, this feeling of, I'm not enough. And he kind of, to be honest with you, I'll say this, because nobody's going to know who I'm talking about. His personality kind of had a personality where he would goad you and kind of push you away. And he was also kind of clingy in some ways. He didn't want to be alone. He wanted to be around people. And, he wanted your attention. And it's like, I just met you. I'm a stranger. I got to go work on my own talk. And, but it's just shame. And here's a self-sabotage. Here's silver platter. You managed somehow to get in the door. That's a perfect, opportunity in our culture that says you have, you're an expert's expert, that you got to do a talk like this. And here you are walking in that door and you totally bomb it. And there's no excuses, sure, you had 30 days to prepare, but you had 30 days to prepare. You didn't have to wait to the last minute and then deliver it the way you delivered it. You completely bombed. And so shame causes self-sabotage. Shame can creates self-fulfilling prophecies. I'm afraid of blah, blah, blah happening and this bad thing happening. But then it happens. Shame causes us to get in relationships with the wrong people. Shame causes us to minimize our needs, causes us to feel like other people's needs are more important. And in relationships, of course, they're both equally important. But it says, you know what, yours are more important than mine. and then we bury what we need. And one of the things too about burying what we need is everybody that pretty much has an affair, and I'm being very general, but I believe it's also very, 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 very true, that everybody that has an affair is acting out of shame. Because usually the pattern of somebody who has an affair, and there's different paths that people get there to, but when somebody has an affair, they are burying their needs. They're not asking for what they want or need, and they're burying what they need, and that creates resentment towards their partner. And they begin to feel like, you know what, I'm giving a little bit more than you're giving, and I'm sacrificing more than you're sacrificing, or I've given more than you're given. And when we have resentment, it leads to entitlement. I'll just take what's mine, or I'll just take it, I deserve it. And so we justify it that way. And you have a lot of really good people who are nice, kind human beings, because that's sometimes what shame can cause us to do, is we deny our needs. So our friends would think we're really nice, really kind, sweet people. So on the surface, these are really nice people that everybody would like, who end up having affairs. And they, totally devastate their spouses, destroy their families, and stuff like that. But the genesis of all that is just shame. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. And I'm not addressing all the little, things that lead to that and the contributing factors, but that at the core, that's a huge contributing factor, is I'm not enough. And when we feel that way, we bury what we need, we bury how we feel, and we can, we bury our anger even, and it leads to an internal anger towards our partner, where we just say, you know what, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to do it however I want to do it. And so that shame is a big deal. And so back to your original question, working through our shame. And this is where it can be difficult. One of the best ways to work through shame is through self-disclosure. I'm afraid if you see me, I'm afraid if you really get to know me, you won't like me. But the irony is that's the same path that heals shame, is when you do see me, and you do like me, and you do validate me, and you do understand me, then that heals my shame. And so shame keeps us from even taking that jump, keeps us from even crossing that bridge of self-disclosure and vulnerability and transparency. But when we do, and we're met with, I get you, I understand you, it's okay, that heals shame. And so, sometimes that may be a therapist. That's the person that helps us heal our shame. It could be our spouse or our romantic partner who helps us with that. It could be a really good friend. But we have to find ways to heal that shame. And one of the best ways, because toxic shame is ultimately created through rejection. It's through connection and acceptance that heals shame. And people are terrified of letting themselves be seen, because it's scary, because you could reject me.
It is.
Yeah.
All right, that's another episode in the books. Hello? I said it's over. Why are you still listening? Like, seriously, the episode is over. If you're still listening right now, you know what? You're probably a chronic procrastinator. Guess what? I'm still listening too. Come on, for real, seriously. We gotta go do something productive. No, like for real. No, for real. Okay, you can keep listening.